Good morning, everyone. It is day 6 and it is also Saturday, so I don't actually have a whole lot to do today. So, yeah, I'm at breakfast, I worked out and everything, so that's all good. And it's basically just the same as the first day with the omelet. Yeah, I will actually, I already used my prison hack, so it's all nice and hot, which is nice. I'm wondering if I'm gonna get any sort of plastic poisoning from this though, because they're all in plastic containers, and it's going on a towel on top of a very hot source and being heated by steam. But it's only for 2 weeks, so I'm sure that I'm gonna be fine. In terms of what I'm doing today, it was suggested that I actually show you guys what I do during my days instead of just talking about it, which I guess the rule is show, don't tell, so I've just been telling. So yeah, I'm actually gonna show. I am planning on doing quite a bit of drawing today. I have been working for the last little while to really try and improve my art, especially in terms of like improving the art form. Because I do almost exclusively traditional art. Don't really like I don't like the learning curve that comes with doing it on a computer, and I also don't have the setup for it, and I'm a total cheap ass, so I'm not gonna buy the setup. The fact that I have 100 Copic markers is beside the point. I am going to be doing some basically practice art today, so I'll be doing forms and landscaping and some training for or practice for getting values right. So I will be showing that off for you guys a little bit later too, and if you want, draw along with me. I'll see you later. Okay, so how I'm gonna do this is I have my tools that I'm gonna use. I have my sketchbook. These are a few pieces that I did yesterday. And of course I have an eraser. I have 2 pencils, a mechanical pencil, and a regular graphite pencil. And then I also have a couple of pens for lining if I do want to do any lining. I have my brush pen. This is my largest brush pen for line art. And then I have my smallest just felt point pen. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of grayscaling to try and improve my abilities with shape and shadow. So I'm going to choose 3 different grays. Moving on, what I'm going to be doing first is I will be just doing some blocking, and this was advice that I found on a YouTube video, and it was that you will basically just be creating a few different sketches, essentially blocking in different shapes, and it's called a napkin sketch to just get your creative juices flowing and to try and figure out what type of meaning you're trying to convey. So as you can see, I have gridded out my paper so that I can have a few small sketches, and I will now be, first of all, figuring out a way to mount this camera. I don't have a mount. And then I will be going in and trying to figure out some of my sketches. So at the start of this, I'm just starting on some basic blocking, trying to process through how I want this to turn out. I started with the idea of something very natural, maybe a nature scene or a meadow. And as I continued, it started to take a little bit more shape. I am sorry about the lack of definition. It's really hard to see because I'm using pencil and I'm going very, very light. And my camera setup is not professional, so you'll have to excuse that. And as we continue on, I am blocking out the borders of the piece. I wanted to have a very nice guided view, so on the edges of the front part with the foreground, there are some pretty solid borders, so that guides the eye towards the back of the piece. Grayscaling and the napkin sketching that I talked about at the beginning, because I am a very detailed person and I usually like to make complete pieces. So I decided the main thing I was going to focus on practicing with these set of drawings is to divide the foreground, midground, and background with the use of grays. The other thing I wanted to explore was cool grays versus warm grays, so that I could see how the tone of the gray was affecting how I felt about the piece. Alright, so this is how it turned out, and it's very simple. I've just got my foreground with some rocks and trees, midground with a little meadow with more trees that lead your eye into the background, where we've got this nice big cliff on each side leading into a waterfall. I probably should have separating the forest from the cliffs, so that the cliffs were, maybe all of the cliffs were in the complete background instead of also in the midground. And then having the forest further back going into leading your eye all the way, instead of having kind of a split midground where I have trees and then rock. So, we're learning. Moving on to the next one, I'm thinking this will be a little bit more of a city landscape, more man-made. After thinking about this one for a little bit, I decided that I wanted to go with, like I said, something very human and industrial. I really enjoy drawing very structured, kind of scratchy type artworks, because it feels very human to me. I love structure, and humans are far more structured than nature. And while I find nature a little bit easier to draw because you can be wibbly wobbly with your lines, I prefer the architecturally sound, rigid lines of other types of art, especially in human settings. At the same time, though, I really like drawing the eye in interesting ways and with different clumps of activity. I like pictures with lots of activity, and so I decided to draw this as an alley scene. It was also a really nice way to practice drawing the eye to the back with, again, the foreground, midground, and background. I also have a lot of practice drawing pictures that portray the mess of human life with, like I said, I like activity, and the mess of human streets and alleys and cities is pretty fun to scribble about and draw. lines pop. For the nature piece in the first one, I didn't go over it very much with my lining pens, but with the second piece, because I wanted the different lines and the scritchy scratchy line art to pop, I went back over a couple of different times. And I went back over with the grays a couple times too to help smooth it out and darken the front, lighten the back, etc. So here we go with the second piece, and I'm actually really happy how this one turned out. It seems to have a really nice gradient from dark in the front to mid-tone to light in the back. I think maybe I didn't need so much detail back here. There's not very much, but I think the dress form right in the back is probably too dark. Like, I should have just left it in a pencil outline instead of using the pen to outline it. The door, same thing. Like, these lines back here should have just been pencil, since this is a thick mid, or well, it's small, but mid, and then the background should have just maybe been pencil. This midground, I'm really happy with the midground. It's just like this little animal scrounging for scraps. This, I'm not really sure how to draw broken glass. This was supposed to be a broken bottle, and it worked pretty well at first, but I think I added too much detail to it instead of leaving the inside dark and the outside nice and simple. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. Over here, just like with these trash bags, or basically just trash, like whatever you wanted to imagine it as. Over here, this is like kind of old clothing and stuff like that was just thrown onto the street. And then I felt like there was a little bit of imbalance between the two sides, because on this side over here, I've got a little bit more activity with this, so it throws the balance slightly over here with this entire wall being blank. So I just decided to add this. I'm not sure. I probably didn't have to add that whole thing. I probably could have just added some scribbly scratchy lines like I did on this wall, and that probably would have been fine. But since this is traditional art, you can't hit the Command Z, and yeah, overall I'm pretty happy with how it is, even though I did make a few mistakes. The next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to try out drawing something with a subject. So I might draw a composition surrounding one specific subject. With this third piece, I totally forgot about keeping things simple, and I started out with just a few blocking shapes so that I could get a general feel of the composition, where I wanted the bigger objects and the smaller objects. And while I did want a subject in this, that was the only kind of idea I had going in. And as I drew, I started to develop the idea of maybe some sort of room, some sort of grand room where you can see the scale of it. So I was taking things up just a little bit from the previous drawing, so not only dealing with fore, mid, and background, but also trying to work with portraying scale in an art piece. Like the last lot of inking on this to get really nice crisp lines, and I ended up using my ruler a lot, and every time I thought, oh, maybe I won't use the ruler for this, I ended up pulling the ruler out again because I can't stand wonky perspective. It really disrupts the entire piece for me as I'm looking at it, and even when I'm drawing, if I have even one line that has a wrong perspective, I will go back and go over it again because it just makes me crazy. So yes, I kept picking up and putting down my ruler throughout this piece, probably every 15 seconds. as I continued on this art piece, it started to look more and more as I had pictured it, and it took shape into the form of a very large kind of throne room with just a single subject who was very, very small, and a little bit of activity in different parts of the room to show toys and books and things that one might find in a little boy's room. And the emotion that I wanted to convey here was one of loneliness. Just the image of a small, lonely little boy. Maybe his parents are gone, maybe they're not, maybe they just ignore him. But kind of the image of someone who has everything except for their parents' love. And yes, that's depressing, but sometimes art is depressing. So here's how it turned out, and I'm not displeased. I think that the composition is really good, but if this were a digital painting, or if I were to do it again, then I would, again, instead of using pen on this, I would just leave it pencil so that it would kind of homogenize it instead of having these really sharp lines pop out. I really like the angles, the composition, the perspective, I think is all really good. It's just that the definition between the background, midground, and foreground is really difficult to see. Partially because it's supposed to be so big, but something like a fireplace that's normally a little bit smaller is really big, and then the boy is very small. So if you've never seen this scene before, it would be really difficult to tell, and it would feel a little bit weird. So yeah, other than that though, I'm really happy with the composition of this one. But I think if I were to choose one of these three that had the best divisions between midground, foreground, midground, background, I would say both of these ones have really good divisions. Truthfully, probably this one, in terms of balancing its complexity with foreground, midground, background. So this ended up, though, not actually being any sort of ode to any sort of book character or something like that. It was more just a creative exercise, and I definitely had fun doing it.